welcome to the Legal Insight Podcast by HHQ, where we help you unpack the world of law, business, tech, and more. Now, today we're entering episode 20, and we're picking up where we left off from episode 19, where we talk about the introduction of the Consumer Credit Bill 2025. Now, in the last episode, Johnson and Khai, who are with us in the studio again today, they gave us a fantastic overview of the Consumer Credit Bill and help us understand the basics of stuff like BNPL, what it means under the law, invoice factoring, and also equipment leasing. Now, I'm not kidding. Ever since the Consumer Credit Bill 2025 was released, now you guys have been swamped with inquiries from fintech players, from BNPL players, stuff like that. Now, especially those operating in the consumer credit space. And it's easy to see why, right? The once wild, wild west of the credit market is finally being reined in, right? Finally, the horse is not wild anymore, or no longer going to be wild anymore, right? Is to be humbled, right? Now, as Johnson sneakily hinted in the last episode, operating without a license is going to be a very serious offense. So again, this bill is no joke. And honestly, using buy now, pay later to buy a piece of fried chicken, it still angers me till today. Like,
bro, I love it.
I mean, I'm not even fully owning the piece of fried chicken that I'm eating today. Like, what do we own anymore these days?
I don't own nothing and then you'll be happy.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm an iPod Classic guy. I like to own something and then like download the music. Illegal. No. Let's not go there. Right? So, but I think there has to be a line somewhere to protect consumers and the wider financial system itself. We've seen debt bubbles, break out of nowhere. Now, this is why this bill is important. And today, we're thrilled to have both of you back today, again, to really dissect the law and give us all the key takeaways without needing to read the absolutely dense bill from cover to cover like you guys have done for this. Now, Johnson, let's dive straight into it as usual. We talked a lot about buy now, pay later in the last episode. Now, since we're expecting the Consumer Credit Bill to be passed quite soon, if passed, and if the business operates a BNPL business without getting a proper license, what are the consequences? Can you just give us the rundown right now?
Yes, it's a very, very big if. And at the same time, we are also really expecting this particular if will actually come true. And I think that right now, the entire fintech space, we are really believing that the Consumer Credit Bill 2025 will eventually turn into law. It's either a matter of time of this year or otherwise next year. So if you are listening out there and if you are actually providing buy now, pay later services, once the bill has been turned into law and then you're operating without a license, the consequences will be extremely severe. Why do we say it's severe? Because it's actually more than just financial penalty. If you're operating without a license and upon commission, you will be potentially facing a financial penalty of up to 5 million. Otherwise, you'll be facing jail terms of up to 5 years or both. So right now, we are not only talking about you paying a small fine. We are talking about you as a director. You are actually looking at jail for 5 years. So this is why we say that it's no longer Wild Wild West. It's going to be heavily regulated under the new bill, potentially the new law.
That's pretty brutal. Thanks, Johnson. Now, Khai, turning to you, since there's now a need to be licensed, could you just provide us some insights as to how to get this license? Is there a process if a business wants to actually operate on a BNPL model?
Yeah. On a high level basis, the licensing process under the Consumer Credit Bill is actually I wouldn't say it's straightforward, but it's very structured. So they lay down to you step by step what are the things to be done. So of course, step one is to fill up the application form. So essentially, you're providing most of your information through the form itself already. Once the form has been sent in, right, and also together with all the supporting documents, it will then go through a vetting process where the Consumer Credit Commission, will actually look at whether or not you fit the bill, the company as a whole fit the bill to be a licensed credit service provider. They will actually assess, among other things, right? Whether the directors and the shareholders are fit and proper, whether you have the minimum financial requirements to operate the business, and other licensing requirements as well. So once you manage to fulfill all these things, then only you'll be getting a license. Otherwise, you may actually receive an inquiry for further information, or they may just reject your application altogether.
Is licensing automatic? Like, okay, once I submit the form and
No,
just
no.
go through the process,
Like
you're done.
like I said just now, there are conditions to be met.
Yeah.
There are certain threshold that you are supposed to put in place. Minimum financial requirements is one of the key threshold or minimum conditions that you
Yeah.
need to fulfill first before you can get a license, right? Yeah.
Sure. Now, Johnson, maybe you can just expound on what Khai just alluded to. Are there any financial requirements or minimum requirements that needs to be met for a BNPL to be approved, license to be approved?
Yeah, so just want to add on to what mentioned by Khai earlier. So in order to actually operate, in order for you to actually obtain a license, it's not going to be straightforward. It's not going to be automatic. Otherwise, everyone will be running this business. Otherwise, I myself will also be applying for the license because
BNPL
knowing
law firm.
how lucrative it is. And one of the key requirements, as mentioned by Khai, will be the minimum financial requirement. So if one is familiar with regulators, whether is it from SC or from BNM, having minimum financial requirement is something not uncommon. So typically there will be a number of business in which if you want to operate, you will need something we call as minimum financial requirements, such as 5 million and above. And then in this particular case, if you want to operate a buy now pay later business, we don't know what is the minimum financial requirement yet, but this is just a educated guess. The amount would be rather substantial, as the intention is to really filter out companies, especially fintech companies.
Yep.
They are not financially stable. Because after all, we have to understand, buy now pay later is a form of, I call it microfinancing. It's a form of microfinancing, and then it's going to have certain effect towards the wider financial system. So this is why for a startup company, for fintech companies, or anyone else, if you intend to actually provide this sort of services, these sort of financial services, you yourself must be financially stable.
That's interesting. But Khai, what's your view on these minimum financial requirements? You guys are expecting it to be substantial.
Yeah, definitely.
Now,
In the millions.
if it's in the millions,
Yeah.
what happens to those startup companies? Like, I'm just starting a new BNPL service. I want to get into it. They don't have deep pockets. Now, what are your thoughts on these?
Yeah. So Johnson has said it just now, and I echo the same view as well. The minimum financial requirement is there for a reason. It is to weed out or to filter out companies that do not really have a very thick cushion to provide lending, right? Because then what if they've lent out all the money and they don't have any money left to operate and run their businesses? Then what next? So essentially, it will be very tough for startups who are running very, very lean. So I think what we will see is if fintech companies, fintech startups who have the technology and the innovation to operate their business but don't have the necessary cash to meet the financial requirements, they may well themselves go and lend from a third party, either a VC or a PE fund, who is willing to then bankroll them, give them the amount that's required to meet the financial requirements and more to sustain the business operations. Or they could just rethink their business model and maybe come up with a joint venture agreement, for example, with a license, with another license entity, to then provide their technology to them.
Yeah.
That makes sense, Khai. Now, besides financial strength, does it mean that if someone has all the cash in the world, anyone can just operate a BNPL company or business? Because let's be honest, it can be dangerous for someone to have money, but they're not ethical, they're not fit and proper to run a credit business. So are these are there fit and proper requirements as well? There are ethical licensed money lenders, and there are also licensed money lenders who are extremely unethical, right? So maybe Khai, you can let us know.
Yeah, so to answer your questions strictly, not anybody can get, with money, will be able to get a license to operate a BNPL service, for example, under the Consumer Credit Bill. One of the conditions I believe that I mentioned just now is a fit and proper requirement. Essentially, the directors and the shareholders of the company or the applicant will need to fulfill a certain fit and proper requirement. The precise fit and proper requirement, how is it going to be assessed, is still unknown. But we know from the Consumer Credit Bill that these people, directors and shareholders, need to demonstrate personal integrity, competence, financial soundness, and they need to continuously comply with all these standards. If we were to take cue from existing fit and proper requirements under, say, SC's RMO's guideline, right? Essentially, if I can just summarize it very, very high level, they need to make sure that all the stakeholders, directors, and shareholders, they are not criminals. They are not convicted with crimes. They are not under investigation for having committed certain crimes, in a sense, right? And they need to be someone with a certain standing within the industry. Yeah. So typically, you're looking at these kind of people to be your directors and shareholders in order for you to be able to get a license.
Yeah.
Yes, cool. I don't want my house to be splashed with red paint for, missing my payments on fried chicken. Yeah, I'm still on that. Now, Johnson, building on that, since now it's so difficult, or it sounds difficult to get a BNPL license.
Yeah.
With all these requirements, there's this cascading effect, or there's this direct relation to a license being hard to get to M&A activity.
Yes.
So I can imagine valuations for licensed businesses now will skyrocket, and probably a lot more M&As coming up.
Definitely.
Once the bill is passed. Or even before the bill is passed. Now, based on your reading of this bill, how easy it is to actually acquire a substantial stake in a BNPL business? Are there like certain guardrails for that as well?
So right now, when we are talking about substantial stake, we're actually referring to 33% or more within a company. Because technically, from a very corporate perspective, the moment you're owning, let's say, anything above 30%, chances are you are holding a majority block of the company, in which you have the right for you to actually control the management. You have the right for you to actually structure the company based on how you want it to be. And then right now, based on the requirement, based on the reading of the bill, in order for you to acquire a substantial interest in the company, you need to obtain approval from the commission. And in order for you to actually get the approval from the commissions, as mentioned by Khai, fit and proper criteria, fit and proper tests will be required. So in other words, just because you have money, just because right now I'm a PE fund, I'm a VC company, and then I would like to purchase maybe 50% of a company, it's not going to be a straightforward M&A that you just sell me the share. Because in order for you to do so, number one, you must make sure whoever is acquiring would be able to pass the test, and then you would need to actually obtain the prior approval. So will this actually affect valuation? Our answer is straightforward, yes. Because this is going to be making it so much more difficult for anyone, number one, to actually operate the business. Number two, even right now, I'm able to operate the business for them to actually sell the business to a third party in order for them to raise funds or for any other purposes is going to be a lot more difficult. And then these kind of challenges typically will be translated into the valuation of the business. So this is why we think that fintech will eventually be a very valuable, at the same time, very regulated business moving forward.
Wow, interesting. Now, Khai, given how hard it is to acquire a substantial stake, wouldn't it just make sense for someone to transfer their BNPL license to another company instead? That kind of solves the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. If we can do it that way, then I think it means that there's a loophole in this regulation, right? So the answer is no. You are not able to transfer. You're not able to assign or sell or pass on the license to anybody, to a third party, essentially, without prior approval. So essentially, the entire sector is moving towards very strict regulations. They don't want anybody to just obtain a license, right? You can just use someone who is fit and proper to set up a company and obtain a license, and then get the person to transfer it to you. So if you can do it that way, you really sidestep the whole purpose of protecting consumer and the whole purpose of setting this bill altogether. So the bill is, I would say at this point in time, watertight in this area with regards to how to obtain a license, who can obtain a license, and subsequent dealing with the license.
That's good to hear. It sounds like we are well regulated, right? Not just heavily regulated. So for those who are already operating a BNPL business, Johnson, and I know we have a few of such clients already, how would you advise your clients who are already operating in this space to prepare accordingly before the bill is passed?
So typically we'll be telling our clients a very structured 3 steps approach. So number one, put it that way, whether you're operating on buy now pay later services, invoice factoring, or equipment leasing, something that we mentioned in our previous episodes. The first step is for you to first audit, first assess, and first examine the business offering of your organization to make sure whatever that you're offering, whether your activities of a business, does it fall within the ambit of the Consumer Credit Bill 2025?
Yep.
If the answer is yes, then you have to move on to the second step. The second step, it involves you talking to your lawyers, because you have to understand the moment this particular bill turns into law, then it means that you will be regulated. So let's say for a startup company, you may not have a legal head. You may not even have a legal manager as well. So how are you going to navigate it? How are you going to ensure that whatever that you are doing is well regulated? How are you going to ensure that you are properly licensed? So in that case, you have to start looking from a legal perspective as well. For fintech company, it's not only about financial and technology. Regulations, legal requirement matters a lot. And then the third part, our advice is, because right now, as mentioned by Khai, we all know there are like different requirements such as fit and proper tests, especially the minimum financial requirement. Then in the case, you have to start looking the way for the exit. Potentially, as mentioned by Khai, you can enter into a joint venture agreement with another company so that you are able to ensure the moment the bill turns into law, you'll be fully prepared to actually meet the requirement.
Thanks so much, Johnson. That's really clear. And thank you, Khai, as well, for your time today.
Thank you.
Now, from a Wild Wild West kind of environment, the consumer credit space is finally being regulated and being structured. And I think that brings a lot of comfort to consumers like ourselves. Now, given how few lawyers actually specialize in this area of fintech, I can foresee a lot of businesses will actually face regulatory challenge in, even just understanding this bill itself.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, if you'd like to understand more, like what Johnson and Khai said, bring them out for coffee, or if you can get away with it, just bring them out for hot pot. I'm sure they'll be happy to speak to you over a good meal, right? So do follow our podcast. We're going to just watch this space, and we're going to talk more about this in the coming weeks as it develops. Now, thanks again for tuning in. This has been the Legal Insight Podcast by HHQ. We'll see you in the next episode.